Okay, good morning, algebra students. Today we're going to do factoring by grouping. So this is 12-2, factoring by grouping. So get out your notebook. Let's write this stuff down. We've got some notes at the beginning here. So it says to factor by grouping, you must first group the first two terms together. And then you're going to group, and what I mean by grouping is you're actually going to put them in parentheses, and then you're going to group the next two terms together, and then you're going to make sure that there is a plus sign between the two groups. Then you're going to pull out the greatest common factor of each group, and then you're going to rewrite your answer as two factors. Remember, factors are two things that are multiplied together. All right, and the reason we group, and you'll see we're beginning with a weird example, but the reason we're going to group is usually when we have four terms and it's not a true trinomial. So let's begin. Write down example 1. Now this one has already kind of been grouped for you, so you can see that this is a binomial because you have a term here. This is one term and this is another term. So we've already grouped the x minus 3 and the 3x squared together, and then we've grouped the 5 and the x minus 3 together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to divide out a greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor, and you have to look at this as this is one term right here. And the greatest common factor of this term and this term, you can see what do they have in common? Well, they have that parentheses in common. So I'm going to write that right here, x minus 3, because I'm dividing that out of both terms. So when I divide it out there, and then I'm going to divide it out there. And then what I have left, I will put in parentheses 3x squared plus 5. So this is actually the two factors that when you multiply them together you would get your answer. So that is the answer to number 1. Okay, let's go. We have 6 examples. Alright, for number 2, this is very similar to the first one. So we've already grouped together in this one again. So what we've done is we've grouped these two terms together, and then we've grouped these two terms together. So this is a binomial because you have one term here, and this is one term. Remember, they're separated by plus and minus signs, and that's the plus sign that separates it. So now, what do they have in common? Well, you can see that they have in common the y plus 3 and the y plus 3. So we're going to divide that out. Remember, when you divide it out, you put it in front. Okay, so we're going to put that in front. That's divided out. That's divided out. Well, what do we have left? We have 4x cubed plus 2. And this is going to be my answer. And you can multiply that out and you could get a trinomial. Okay? Or you might get a 4-termed problem. But I'm not going to multiply it out because we don't really need to. I'm just looking for the two factors that we can group together. All right, let's do another one. Example 3 is really a good example of a term, not a term, of a polynomial that we would use grouping. So you're going to use grouping, the grouping method, whenever you have 4 terms. So there are 4 terms here in this particular problem, so write them down. And what you're going to do is the steps that you wrote down in the beginning, and that is you're going to group the first 2 terms together. Then you're going to group the second 2 terms together. Then you're going to factor out a greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out of this one, what is a greatest common factor? It would be x squared, right? They both have an x squared. Now I divide that out. What is x to the third divided by x squared? You get the remainder of x. And x squared divided by x squared, you'd get a remainder of 1. So this factors to x squared times x plus 1. Then you are going to go to the next term, or the next binomial, and we're going to factor out a greatest common factor. So look, they both have a 3. So I'm going to factor out a positive 3. And then what do I have left? So when I factor out a 3 here, I end up with x left over. And when I factor out a 3 there, I end up with plus 1. And when you're doing this grouping, you'll notice that when you factor out, these two should be exactly the same, because that's what they have in common. That's your goal. So now you have another step. Now you can see this is kind of where we were on the beginning of the last two problems. So I'm going to factor out again an x plus 1 here, and then I'm going to factor out an x plus 1 here. When I factor that out, I take it and put it in front. So that factors, and then I put my remainder, which is x squared plus 3, grouped together as the other factor. And if I were to multiply this out, this is my answer, these are the two factors. If I multiply this all together, I would end up getting that answer. All right, let's try another one. All right, example 4. So example 4, we're going to do the same thing. You notice you have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a polynomial with 4 terms. Your goal is to factor out, to find the two factors that multiply to get to this polynomial. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and the second 2 terms together. And then I'm going to factor out greatest common factor. So I look at the 3x cubed and the x squared, and the biggest thing they have in common is x squared. And then I divide it out. So what do I have once I divide out the x squared? I have a 3, and then I have an x, and then I have minus 1, because x squared divided by x squared gives me this 1. Then I'm going to factor out on this side, and it looks like I can factor out a 4. So I'm going to factor out a positive 4, and then divide that out. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, bring down the x, and negative 4 divided by a positive 4 is negative 1. So notice again, when I factor it out, I end up with a 3x minus 1 and a 3x minus 1. They should match. So now when I divide this out, the greatest common factor is 3x minus 1. And that cancels, and then I can divide by a 3x minus 1 here, and that cancels. So that goes in front. That's one of your factors. And then you write down what you have left, and what I have left is the x squared plus 4. So I get x squared plus 4. And this would be my answer. All right, 2 more. All right, example 5, you're going to write it down. Again, we have 4 terms in all of these problems. So this is how you're going to factor with 4 terms. So again, you group the first 2 together and group the second 2 together. And notice that I'm including, when I do this, I have to include that minus sign. All right, so now I'm going to divide out, and I see that they both have a y, so I'm going to divide out a y. And then what do I have left after I divide? So I have y squared divided by y is y, and 8y divided by y is just 8. So y plus 8. So then I'm going to do this next one here. And notice that I have a minus sign. So I'm going to have to divide out that minus sign. All right, so here I'm going to divide by a negative x. So negative x. That's what I have in common here, and I have in common there. So when I divide out that negative, I end up with a positive y, because a negative divided by a negative makes a positive. The x's cancel, so I get a y. And then I end up with a positive 8 over here. And again, they should match. So now, to rewrite, now I can just skip the next step that I've been doing if you want to. And you can just go, and you can see that this is one of your factors there. So I would just write y plus 8. And then you're going to write the remaining terms together, y minus x. So that's going to be the two factors for number 5. All right, let's try the last one, which is number 6. So write the problem down and group the first two together, group the second two together, pull out a common factor of x squared. What you have left is x plus 4. You're going to pull out a negative 2, factor by a negative 2 here. When you do that, you end up getting a positive x plus 4. And again, these should match. If it's not matching, you're doing something wrong. All right, so then I just rewrite the answers. I have the x plus 4 as one of my factors, and then I put these two together, x squared minus 2. And if I multiply these two together, I would end up getting that polynomial. All right, so that's your lesson on factoring by grouping, and you will have an assignment for homework. Thanks for watching.